All right, good evening and welcome to this week's installment of Thursday with Jamila. I am super excited about tonight's topic. It came to me in what I would consider an unconventional way, but I just think that that's how God chooses to deal with me because when it comes in a way that I'm not expecting, but it's so spot on, I never question what He's wanting to say or if He's asking for me to say it. So I am just excited to be able to get on. Hey, to our IG family. We have some people that are viewing from that platform as well. I'm excited, so I want to jump right into it. You guys know I believe in being respectful of your time, and since you've logged on, I believe there is something that needs to be said for you to be able to hear. So tonight's topic is called Lost in Transit. And I'm talking about this specifically because I had found myself in a season, and I made a post about it probably about a week ago, where I was just kind of feeling like I was wandering. And I've never wanted to be a wanderer. I don't necessarily want to just seem like I'm stepping just to be stepping. I always want to make sure that I'm moving in the direction that's intentional and purposeful for the fulfillment of my life. And so I was sitting there and I was journaling, and I was just like, what's happening? A lot of things just seem to be at a standstill. Like, I understand that we're progressing, but I feel like I'm paralyzed, if you will. And so I like to set the tone with definition because I believe that when we are learning something, that we all should be using a working definition, if you will. So we're going to start with defining what loss is defined as. So loss is to not be made use of, not won or claimed. It's to no longer possess something. It is to be ruined or destroyed physically or morally. I really want you to hang tight to that particular definition. It is to be taken away or beyond reach or one's attainment. Okay, so that's our working definition this evening for the word lost. When we talk about in transit, now everybody is home together, right? In this quarantine season, we're home, we're doing everything from home, so we're shopping from home, right? So a lot of things that we need are in transit. Right? So whether it's through UPS, FedEx, UPS, whatever the methodology is being used to transport the goods to you, most often that which you are needing or you have solicited, it is in transit to you. So let's start with the working definition of what in transit means. Customarily, when something is in transit, if you are using the U.S. Postal Service, it means that the item that you are waiting on is being processed or is being transported to your local post office. Why am I doing this? Because I really want us to have a grasp on what it is that we're talking about. So when we're talking about lost in transit, it makes sense. We want to be able to connect the dots. So to lost means that it's not won, it's not claimed, it's out of our reach. If it's in transit, it means that it's being transported for delivery, but it's on its way to the post office, right? So it's on its way to the hub. When something is in transit to the next facility, it means that your package is moving through the system, right? But it's on track to be delivered by the due date. So customarily, when something is being shipped to you, you get a confirmation number. It tells you when you can expect to receive the thing that you are waiting on. So when it's in transit, it's on the way to the post office. When it's in transit to the next facility. Now that's the thing that most of us are not expecting. Right? My package is supposed to be coming to me. It's in the place where it's being processed. It should go from process to me. Why then would be in transit to the next facility? It happens. And I'm going to give you a story to connect all of it. So when it's in transit to the next facility, when it does happen, it's on its way to the next post office, but it's still expected to reach you by the designated due date or delivery date. Now, what happens when we get that thing that says it's in transit but arriving late? This happened to me. So I'm giving you a story because I like to paint a picture. I like to bring it full circle. So now you're telling me that the thing that you just told me that was on its way to me is now on its way to another facility. Now you're telling me it's on the way and it's going to arrive later than expected? Yes, but the part that we need to understand is it's arriving later than expected, but it's still on the way. Why did I walk through all of that? Tonight's topic of lost in transit was given to me as a real life scenario to pay attention to and then speak to. And it was inspired by some waist beads that I ordered. Go figure. So I have been wearing waist beads since May. And it was something that I attached to my body as a permanent reminder to hold myself accountable. Okay, it's all going to make sense. And so I received this notification stating that the goods that I ordered were supposed to be arriving by a Tuesday at 8 p.m. At 8:01, because I'm a punctual and timely person, and if you tell me something's going to be available by a particular date and time, I am looking forward at that particular date and time. I will wait to the 9th or 11th hour, whatever the proper terminology is for that. I will wait until the last minute. If you say 8 p.m., yes, I will give you the grace period of 8:01 because I am always one that says if it arrives at the time that it says, then it's late. So I always should be a little bit before, right? So at 8:01 on a Tuesday, it became clear to me that the thing that I was waiting on was not coming to me on the date that it was specified to be delivered by. So I was like, okay, great. So let me check to see what the update status is. The updated status was that it's coming from, that it was in transit to the next facility. And I said, well, why? So when I went and I read the details, it said that the package had been delivered to a post office on the north side. I live on the south side. So the thing that I'm waiting on, one, didn't even come into a hub that was conveniently located to make sure that the package did arrive to me on time. It actually went into another hub, the north. I would like for you guys, as a side note, to go study the winds of God and understand what the northeast, south, and west winds represent. It'll bless you. So the thing that I'm waiting for now is coming from the north to the south. The north represents the rain. Yes, I'm getting super deep and super spiritual about a package that I was waiting on because that's what God told me to talk about. So the thing that I needed was coming from the north. What comes from the north? The north wind sends the rain. And it washes out that which is not needed. I'm going to give you all the symbolisms in this. Okay, so great. So now this thing that didn't come into the hub that I needed it or expected it to come into, it is now coming from the north side of town and coming to the south side. If you are familiar with Houston, to literally go from the north side of town to the south side of town is like going to a whole nother city. It's just like, it's like, why would you even do that? Okay, fine. So I was toiling with it. And I was like, well, that makes absolutely no sense. So the thing that I need is coming from a side of town nowhere near me. And then people who I've referred this particular company to have received their goods before me. And I ordered first. So how much sense does that make? Toil with it. So now it's saying that it's going to come on a Wednesday. So Wednesday comes and goes and I still don't have a package. So then I do what I know to do, which is sit down with my journal and make sense of a real life scenario that is happening to me in real time, because that is just how I process even what may seem like the most simple thing or the thing that shouldn't matter that much or the thing I shouldn't give that much attention to. So I sat down and said, okay, so I'm not gonna get my package. It's now Tuesday. Wednesday has come and gone. Now, all right, so what's going on? So I sit down and I write in my journal, and I had wrote 5 F's, and I particularly asked God to deal with me about clarity. And I typically always have my journal right next to me, and I don't see it. Okay, well, maybe God don't want me to talk about all my business, but I had asked him for clarity about some particular areas. And I was just like, God, open the eyes of my understanding. Make everything that's happening to me in this season make sense. Bring it full circle. So no sooner did I write that particular entry and I get up and I walk to my laundry room, which is a total of 10 steps or so. So I get up and I walk, and I'm immediately reminded of the children of Israel and how they had to be transitioned from one thing to the next. And that's where the lost in transit topic was fully, it became fully clear to me why he kept saying lost in transit. And so I know when I say lost in transit, most of us think about something that gets lost, like it doesn't reach its expected end. But I want you to look at it from 2 different vantage points. So when you hear lost in transit, yes, there are things that are lost in transit, but I want you to consider, what is it that you need to lose in transit? So while you are being transitioned from this to that, what are some of the things that you need to possibly shed so that you can actually get what's coming? Back to the beads, right? So we're still talking about the beads. All right. So again, I started wearing them in May. I had 2 that I originally got, and I was tracking my progress with them, right? Because I was holding myself to a different standard of accountability when I wasn't on my proper regimen, or when I was going beyond what the beads would allow. There was a level of discomfort that would come. But those beads were going to hold me to a level of accountability based on where they were set, where they were positioned. When those beads were no longer in the position that they originated in, then they had fulfilled their assignment. Right? So I no longer need that bead to serve that particular purpose because it's no longer positioned at the level that's going to hold me to a higher level of accountability. Literally, I lost 1 bead. We tried to reconstruct it, didn't work out. I was working out, and the last inaugural bead, if you will, that I had just randomly comes loose. It doesn't pop, the string just decides, and we're going to sleep, we're done. So everything that I had become accustomed to as an accountability measure was no longer attached to me. So I had to say, well, I didn't spend all this money. I didn't drove to get them put on. I did all the things. If you know about waist beads, it's not a cheap hobby to pick up, if you will, especially if you want quality. So I pick up these things. I've done all that. And so what I heard was, although it was expensive and effective, it's no longer fit for where you're going next. And so how often is it that we keep something attached to us because we've gotten accustomed to it being there, even though it's no longer holding us to a higher level of accountability? It's gotten lost in transit. So the beads started at a particular point that was going to help me get that waistline together, but the beads had dropped to my hip. I don't know that I was trying to lose a hip. I was trying to lose the gut. So the beads sitting down at my hip no longer served a purpose, but they were unraveling, and I kept trying to salvage them, and I kept trying to make it work. I kept trying to force it into fruition, if you will, because I didn't want to lose what I was accustomed to. But they weren't serving a real purpose anymore because they weren't holding me. I wasn't uncomfortable wearing them. There was really no accountability, if you will. They had dropped. They served their purpose. So I would like to ask you, what are some of the things that, because you've gotten so accustomed to them, like the children in Israel, who even complained when they were taken out of Egypt and they were transitioning, and they were like, you brought us out to the wilderness to die. Were there not enough graves in Egypt? Mind you, they had been freed from their oppressor. They had been freed from the life that was holding them stagnant, of not being able to achieve all that they were set out to achieve as the chosen people. But when you are in transition from what you are accustomed to what you have yet to experience, there is something in between that has to be lost. There is something that has to be shed. And when we're not familiar with the course that we're taking, we automatically assume, I must be wandering. I must not be on the proper path because everything before me looks completely unfamiliar, so I must have gone the wrong way. We've all been there at some point in time in our life, right? And so I just wanted to talk about this because I know that during this season, we are in what looks like a never-ending cycle of uncertainty. And we're trying to navigate through. We're trying to figure it out. We're like, okay, I don't feel like I'm moving physically, or I don't feel like I'm progressing. It just seems like I'm in a holding pattern, if you will. But I would like to ask you this: when you are in a situation where you have a due date on something and the expectation is so tied to the delivery date that is not tied to the deliverer, what happens when the delivery date shifts? Do you lose faith in the deliverer's ability to get it to you because you didn't get it by the date of alleged delivery? What exactly are we anchoring our hope and our expectation in? Because I was ready for my stuff to arrive. I paid for it. I wanted it. And the people that were supposed to deliver it, seems like they had it held up in their system, held up in the fact that you didn't deliver it to the proper destination to get it to me at the time that I was expecting. So my faith and my hope and my expectation was in that it was in the delivery date, not the deliverer. I wanted it by this date and it didn't happen by this day. So now I'm frustrated. Now I feel like, well, what was it all for? Now I'm comparing what's on the way to me to what other people have already received. Now I'm mad because y'all got y'all stuff and y'all bragging and y'all showing it to me, and what I'm waiting on still hadn't arrived. But the thing that really was a point of conviction for me is when it said that it was in transit but arriving late. That was the part that really convicted me, because it said it is arriving later than expected, but it's still on the way. It's arriving later than expected, but it's still on the way. So the expectation isn't what I need to hang my hat in. It's in the fact that it's on the way. It is what is promised to me, what is appointed to me is on the way. It's shifted delivery dates. It's on a different time schedule, but it's still on the way. So there's still something to look forward to. Right? Because it's still on the way. And I was like, God, this is really interesting that you want to center this topic around something that seems so unspiritual, if you will. But it really hit home for me. And I've had conversations with people, and a lot of people are in this space where they're just kind of like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like. But the children of Israel had to cross 2 bodies of water before they reached the promise. And I'm saying that specifically because I received a notification that it was on the way. That was the initial. But then it had to go through another facility before it could get to me. So it had to cross 2 checkpoints. And the one thing that I want us to remember, that everything, no matter what it is, the blessing or the recipient of, everything is subjected to a process. Nothing and no one is exempt. Everything. So what is a process then, Jamila? Since everything is subjected to it, what is a process? Why are you hanging your hat there? I'm hanging my hat there because I want us to understand a process is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. For I know the plans that I have for you, saith the Lord. Plans to prosper and not harm you and bring you to an expected end. The expected end requires a processing. It requires a cultivating. It requires a shedding. Yeah, because even the thing that's being prepared for you has to be tailored for you. It has to be cultivated. It will be perfect, lacking nothing. It will be everything that it was originally designed to be, but it too has to be processed. So I could have actually looked at this, because hindsight is 2020, and said, well, listen, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Maybe they're sending packages through thorough cleanings before it comes to me. Maybe there's another process in place to make sure that when it gets to me, it doesn't harm me, but it fulfills the mission that it was sent to accomplish. So when we think about it, I want us to really be cognizant of that, because even when we're going through the process and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense and I'm confused and I'm concerned, what's on its way to me is being processed and perfected for me. So when it comes to me, after I've made space for it, because that's the one point that I failed to mention, I lost 2 of my inaugural waist beads. Annoyed, yes. Okay, I'm still trying to figure out, can we do something with them? Okay, I lost them, but it made space for the new thing that was coming, because he said, behold, I shall do a new thing in you. So what I'm bringing you to doesn't have to resemble what was, because I don't actually even want a trace of what you have grown accustomed to, because I definitely want to have all the space that I need to present to you that which I've tailor-made for you in this season. So yes, the children of Israel had to go through 2 bodies of water. If you're not familiar with the story, because I never want to teach and just assume that because it was what we call a familiar passage that everybody is familiar with the story. So the children of Israel, they were delivered by Moses. Right? Moses was sent as their deliverer to come out of Egypt. When they came out of Egypt, they began their transition. The transition to the promised land was to take but days. That in transit process was a day's journey. Days, not years, not months, not a generation. They spent a generation of time in a position that was only supposed to last 4 days. Why? Because they didn't lose what needed to be lost in transition. They didn't shed the mindset of a slave. They didn't shed the mindset of being oppressed. There was so much in them. They needed an idol. They wanted something tangible to worship. They wanted all these things because they were comparing their transition to what they've seen other people go through, as we normally do, because we want a point of reference. But back to the 2 bodies of water. The first body of water that they had to go through was the Red Sea. Now, when we look at the Red Sea and we look at the meaning of the Red Sea and what it is intended to represent, the Red Sea is a body of water of death for those that are unconscious. But for those who are conscious, it is the baptismal water of the rebirth and transcendence. So those who are unconscious, it is the place of death. But for those who are conscious, those who are fully aware that they are in transition from what was to what is, this is the place of a rebirth. So this is why your enemies can be swallowed up in the Red Sea, because they are unconscious, because they still see you in your previous state. They still see you as property of them. They still see you as one who can be ruled and only allowed to go as far as their need of you, the oppressor. So they don't see you in the truth. But those who have been awakened, who understand that it is time for me from going from this place to the next place, this water will serve as my rebirth. And the beautiful thing about the story is the water stood at attention, and they were able to cross on dry land, leaving no trace and no tracks of what they were leaving behind on the other side. Some of us need to go down again into the place where we can be rebirthed and shred everything that's going to tie us to an old ideology, an old mindset. And the beautiful thing about God, he allows us to cross over on dry land, so there is no trace of what we left behind. That's the freedom. That's the liberty in crossing over. That's body of water number 2. Now, they had one leader to cross them over that body of water. That leader was Moses. But Moses always had an understudy. He had an understudy assigned to come into his life at a particular time. And I want you to hear me and hear me well, because maybe it's not the season where you lead the charge, but maybe it's the season that you get up under sound understanding and doctrine. That way, when the baton is passed, you are familiar with the tribe that you are called to lead. You understand where their shortcomings are. You understand what their hiccups are, and you understand how to lead them beyond what they've already experienced. This may be the season of the understudy. This may be the season to get rooted and grounded in understanding. And it may be the season where you shed and you transition, because listen, they had 2 leaders, 2 bodies of waters, 2 leaders. 2. So Moses got them over. And they were okay for a little while, and they got it right, and they were like, all right, we good. And then they start asking for other stuff that they didn't need. Now I want back the stuff that I'm familiar with. Now I want to know how I'm going to eat. Yeah, I know you put, the fire and the cloud in the sky, and I know you gave us manna. You gave us what we needed for the day, and I still haven't learned how to trust you for tomorrow, even though you've made sure that I have fresh manna every day. You don't give me anything that I need to have leftovers and nibble on the next day. It's perfect and it's befitting for today. So if I can trust you for today, then surely I can believe you for tomorrow. Right? But they had a leader that toiled with them, who would say, oh Lord, I got to give the people what they want, or they're going to turn away from me. I got to give the people what they want, or they won't believe. How many of us in transition get stuck and are tripping over the expectations of people and going back on what we've already declared that we're going to do, because we want to fulfill the expectations of people, and we want to give them what they need or claim to want of us, because we are nervous that in transition I may lose the people that I want to take with me. I'm gonna lose that friend that I want to take with me. I'm gonna lose that lifestyle that I want to take with me. So I'm gonna hold on to it and find a way to put a bow on it, and I'm gonna find a way to cut corners to make sure that it gets to stay with me, because I want to transition this. I will actually throw out stuff that I need to keep what I want. so that it can go with me on this journey. Second body of water is the Jordan River. And this is really where I want us to kind of hone in, if you will. So I'm going to slow down. I'm gonna settle my excitement because I really want us to hear what I have to say next. So you've gone through the Red Sea, your rebirth. But now you got comfortable and complacent in this particular pattern. But now it's time to go to the other side. And now there's a passing of the baton. And so now the leader who got you to this particular place, there's been a transition. There's been a different voice. There's been a different sound. And so now I am here with this new leader, this new lineage, this thing that's going to command of me something that a previous person didn't. But this is the person that's appointed to get me to the other side. Because the promised land is so close. I can see it. I can taste it. But the other leader didn't have the wherewithal to get me there. And that's okay because he fulfilled his assignment in that season. Just like those waste bees did. They fulfilled their assignment in that season. But what I needed for my next didn't resemble what I had to give up. And so now here we are going under a new leadership in the name of Joshua. And the River Jordan represents transition. It's the entering into the promised land, leaving the leadership of Moses, subscribing to the leadership of Joshua. Right? What is the first thing that he told Joshua? Because now that which he studied is no longer a point of reference because they've been transitioned to their next place. He said, be strong and courageous. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. That's found in Joshua 1. Be strong and courageous. Why did he have to keep telling them that? You may not feel strong. You may not feel capable, but be strong and courageous as I've commanded you to do so. So for those of you who feel like, I don't know if I'm capable. If God has positioned you to lead a thing, to command a thing, and leading isn't always about position. You got to learn how to lead your life. So when you are leading, be strong and courageous because there are going to be times when you're unsure and you're uncertain because this is uncharted territory. Be strong and be courageous. Never stop moving in the direction that you've been commanded to go. So they go into the promised land under new leadership. Leadership that was commanded and operated in the realm of be strong and courageous. Who else was transitioned at the Jordan River? There was a transfer from Elijah to the prophetic mantle of Elisha just before Elijah transcended to heaven. Where? At the River Jordan. And he was able to cross on dry land. When God brought Joshua to the Jordan River, if you want to read a scripture reference, it's found in Joshua 4:23. And it says, for the Lord your God has dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed, just as the Lord had done to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we crossed. He dried it up so that you can cross. So Joshua, you crossed over. There was a transfer from Elijah to Elisha, and the waters were drawn back, and they were able to cross over on dry land. In both of those references, the water parted. Oh, but there's still another transition that takes place at the Jordan River. And this is one of my favorites because even Jesus went down at the Jordan. But instead of the Jordan parting, heaven opened. It's the place of transition. It's the place of getting from process to promise. But it's a journey and it's scary sometimes, and it's okay to feel what you feel. What's not okay is to go back to Egypt. It's not okay to go try to pick up 1,000 waste beads on the ground and try to piecemeal it back together because that's what I'm comfortable with. And if I don't have these, they can't see my progress, but you know you've progressed. It's time to transition. Let's bring it full circle when we're talking about the bodies of water. All of God's dealings with Christians will typically occur only after the crossing of the Red Sea. Why? Because that is the place of rebirth. So when it comes to us, we have to be born again. And once we have been born again and we continue in the process, and the saving of the soul is a continual thing, we will be allowed to cross the Jordan. We will be allowed to transition when we throw away what's not necessary for us to walk in the truth of who we've been called to be. And that is one of the hardest things to do, but it's one of the most necessary things to do, because you cannot fully enjoy what's on the way when you don't have adequate space for its arrival. So I don't know what you need to let go of in this season. I don't know what you feel you lost in this transition that you still need. I don't know specifically what God is telling you to let be lost in your transition, but your journal assignment is truly to sit down and ask God, what is this transition that you're taking me through? Open the eyes of my understanding so that I don't walk in error. Surround me with sound judgment and accountability partners attached to my promise. You should have somebody that knows where you're going, who can speak to you, because when you are off track, they can bring you back. There's a voice of reason. You got to have a mentor that knows your path and who can call you out of uncertainty, who can address you as the truth of who you are, who can address you in the fullness of who you are, so that you keep going. A child learns its name when it's brought into this earth because it hears it over and over and over and over. And they are programmed to respond to who they are. Thank you, God. They respond to who they are. So when they are called Jamila, they respond. When you call Sally, my head doesn't turn, because that's not my name. That's not what I'm called to. So you got to have somebody that continues to call you forth. All of you, not allowing you to subscribe to who you are no longer. They call you by who you are, and the more you become familiar with who you are, the easier it gets to take the next step and the next step and the next step, and you grow more confident in where you're going. Go through those 2 checkpoints. Go through the rebirth. Go through the transition so that you can enjoy the fruit of the promise. Lost in transit. Either what do you need to lose in transit, or what is it? Come on, y'all. Because we all got something, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Actually, the fact that you can admit it makes you stronger than the next person, because I'm not holding on to a falsehood or an identity that I know isn't applicable, because I don't want to be out here looking a particular way before people. I truly hope that something was said. I have so many notes, but I do believe that we got to get enough to digest, and then we get enough to process, and then we work through it, and we go back to the particular points that we identify are our areas of opportunity. So whatever it is for you, I truly pray that you are able to, while in this transition, because listen, we're coming on the other side of this. The promise shall be fulfilled. And what I heard at the last minute when I was getting ready is that God watches over his word and is faithful to perform his word, not our expectations or our assumptions of his word. So this is why we need to operate in truth, and this is why we need to know fully what he's saying, because what's going to be fulfilled is what he promised according to his word. He is not obligated to fulfill my assumption. So I got to operate in truth. I got to subscribe to sound doctrine. I've got to surround myself with wisdom, so that when I call a thing forth, I'm calling forth truth, and I am not calling forth damnation. That I am not calling for something that's intended for Joe Blow over there because it looks great. I may not have the grace to operate like them. I may not have the grace or the tenacity to fulfill that obligation. But what you're calling me to, I will respond. And even though I thought at 35 it was going to be X, Y, Z, my expectation will not trump my investment in and my security in the deliverer. What he said he will do, and he will deliver it at its appointed time. Because for everything under the sun, there is an appointed time, there is an appointed season. And so in this season, wherever you are, my true hope and desire is that there is clarity that meets you at the point of your need. I ask that he will reveal it to you in something that may seem small, and you're like, oh, you're going to reveal your word to me this way. Whatever he's got to do, however he needs to reach you, I am praying that he reaches you so that you get to the promise and that you don't spend years wandering when you could be enjoying the fulfillment of what he said was already yours. He called them his chosen people. What he had for them was going to no one other than them. It just took them a while to get it because they couldn't get it right. So we've been in quarantine for what? I don't even know how long anymore. I feel like we've been in quarantine all year. But March, right? So March, April, May, June, July, August. Might as well. We almost in August, right? What is he taking you through during this time? What is he asking of you during this time? Get quiet enough to hear him. Let's learn to be attentive to what he is saying. Let's learn to silence our expectations of what we feel he should be saying so that we can actually hear what he's saying. And I pray that every voice that is alive, that is rose up to confuse you or cause you to get off track, be silenced. I pray that he would anoint your ear gate to hear and recognize truth so that when you hear what he is saying, you are ready to respond. Shed it so that you can have what is intended for you. The temporary fixes are no longer needed. You don't need the crutches. You don't need the band-aids. You've been fortified and you have been established to cross over. So I'm going to the other side and I'm looking to see my brothers and my sisters when I get there. So whatever you need to do to get to the other side, get to the other side. Just like on the plane, your carry-on can't weigh more than a certain amount. When you carrying over the Jordan from the wilderness to the promise, you can only carry what's necessary. So whatever you take with you, make sure it's what's required for you to fulfill the mandate that God has on your life. I love you guys so much. Thank y'all for hanging out with me. I know I have been away, but I've come back recharged. I've come back excited, and I've come back with just what he wanted me to say to each one of you. Love y'all so much. Have a good day. Bye.